Nah. Like, for them, yeah, not for me.
Right, welcome back. We are back on the Feel It, Heal It podcast, and I'm joined with our Latrice.
Yeah, that's me.
And we're talking about a topic today that I feel like isn't discussed enough, and that is being mixed race and growing up mixed race. And often I've spoken to a lot of people of recent that just felt like there were challenges in being mixed race that I don't think our parents took into account. Like, they naively had children and were in love, but didn't think ahead of what does this mean for a child? Because in terms of like belonging, where do we actually belong?
And where is that? Because, like you've said, I think that they look at it and think, oh, like, they're loved, but they're loved by me and the dad or me and the mum. But what does it mean for the wider audience? And I think that struggle, I think the struggle that you get being mixed race initially, especially for me, starts off within the family unit.
How?
In terms of immediate family, you don't really notice it that much. There were certain things where I was like, okay, my dad is raising me like this and my mum is raising me like this, and you could see conflict sometimes being younger. And as growing up, I thought, this is how my dad's side of the family do it, and this is how the mum's side of the family do it. So it raised conflict there, but within the family it wasn't that noticeable. Only when you got outside of that, in terms of like, okay, like, I'm at my auntie's house now, but all my other cousins are white, and it's like, oh, like,
I love
your hair's different, or like, why are you this colour, or and then on the dad's like on my dad's side, as much as like I fit in physically a little bit more because my skin colour was brown, I was still light brown in comparison to everybody else. So I think for me that was probably one of the first times that I'd
noticed it.
Can
you remember how old you were when you first noticed it?
The first time I was made aware of it, that it was any different, in fact, there's two occasions. So my mum's side of the family, I've got younger cousins, so I'm the eldest on my mum's side, by about 5 years. And I remember I used to watch Barney all the time, and watching Barney, there was like loads of little kids and there's a little mixed race kid, and my mum and auntie used to laugh, saying, oh, like, your cousin Brad thinks that the girl on the TV is you
because she was
mixed race, and it wasn't. It was just they come from a predominantly white area, so to a younger child it was innocent, but it was still like, but that's not me. And then in the same area as well, I used to go back and forward to the Wirral every weekend, and there was these girls next door who were my friends, again, very innocent, two twins, and the conversation that they had there was, oh, where have you been on holiday? This is like the first time that they've met me. And I said, I was baffled because I didn't know what the direction of the conversation, and I was like, I've not been on holiday. And they said, so why are you that colour?
How old were you?
Young, maybe no older than 8, 9. And they said, so why are you that colour? And I didn't understand the question, because I was like,
what do you mean?
Just because I'm this colour, like, why are you that colour? But I said, oh, because my dad's black. And they said, oh, where's he been on holiday? And I was like, again, as a kid, I didn't look too much into it, because I just thought, that was strange, and he's not been on holiday. And like, should he have been on holiday? And like, has he been on holiday? And I don't know about it, and this is why. And I didn't know the answers to the questions. And obviously now, as you get older, again, it was just the innocence of them saying, oh, we've never seen anybody brown or black before. How come you're that colour and I'm this colour? And it was more of an understanding, but I couldn't give them the answers at the time.
Did it spark curiosity in you?
I don't think so, but I think that was more because I knew why I was the colour that I was. It was because my mum was white and my dad was black, and when them two people come together, it makes brown. Like, so for me, it was more, I don't know how to explain to somebody who is completely unaware that this is why I am the colour that I am, because my answer was just because I am. And like, you should just know that. And they didn't.
And it's not even in a malicious way.
Not at all.
It's children like being innocent. And I think it's funny because I was speaking to someone on Instagram just last night, and she's a mixed race girl, but her mum's mixed race and her dad's mixed race. So two typical mixed race people who were like mum's white, dad's black.
Yeah.
She felt she looked different, and other children thought she looked different. And like kids would say some mean stuff to her. And we were speaking, and I was like, and it's, as a child, it's just like, you're different to me.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to like, it runs through, I think that runs through us as adults though as well. Like, if someone's different to us, instead of, I think as we get older, we understand it. But if someone's different to us, it's like, oh, well, you're different, so what does that mean about me? Does that mean I'm wrong because I'm not like you? And it's that whole... Do you know what I mean?
There's a bit of stigma there, isn't there, as well? And I think as well, growing up, you don't want to ask the wrong questions, because there's no wrong questions, but there's wrong ways to ask. And there's wrong things to potentially say. And I think when I was growing up, like when I used to dance a lot. So when I was dancing, my dance school that I was at was predominantly white girls, and it was just a lot of, I don't know, like a lot of the questions that they'd ask, I just thought, and now we're getting older, so you've all got mixed race friends or black friends. You're 14, 15, you're in mixed schools. Like there's been that engagement with people of mixed heritage or black or Asian, like whatever it was, and they just ask some stupid questions regarding
like what?
Like like, how come your hair's curly? And it might, like, now being me, I'm like, oh, like black and mixed race people have different shaped hair follicles and that's what makes it curly. But in my head I just thought, because like, just because it was always like a puppeteer or like a little clown that people wanted to prod you, and oh, like you're like alien like, and your hair's not straight like ours, like what's this?
And that whole what's the term for it? Fetish.
Almost.
See, my experience of that whole like, ooh, with my mix didn't come until I was older. Okay. So I'm Iraqi and English. So growing up, when I was being brought up, you say Iraqi and it's, oh, you're a terrorist. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it wasn't like, oh, I was told I was pretty a lot when I was younger. But when I got to a certain age, probably like high school, I was quite lucky because I went to primary school and high school have all been like really multi-cultured. But when I was in certain areas that are like more white areas, the minute I said, oh, I'm Iraqi, it was terrorist. And it was kind of like it was really like a big thing to say I'm Iraqi.
How did that make you feel?
I was quite brazen. I don't know what it did to me like internally, but growing up, the minute I feel attacked my reaction is to pounce. So that would just make me be like, who are you talking to? And then get really fiery and angry. Yeah. But I don't know, looking back, I don't know what that actually did as a child.
It's fight or flight, isn't it? Yeah. And I think already number one, you're the different person. And number two, you don't want to be the different vulnerable person. Yeah. So to save yourself from being vulnerable and crying or showing people, I'm upset by what you've just said. Your obviously reaction was to say,
to fight. And it was
let's have it out.
Yeah. But like with the whole fetishized, or what is the term?
I think that's right.
Is it?
That thing.
You know what I mean though, innit?
I can't say it.
But you know what I mean. Yeah. That didn't come until later. And you know, it came when, so now I feel like men will more think I'm pretty or sexy or beautiful because I have an exotic look, because they can't pinpoint where I'm from.
And it's like this mystery.
Yeah.
Oh, like she's different.
Ooh,
and I've not...
Yeah. So growing up, it was kind of like, oh, you're Iraqi, you're a terrorist, 9/11. And then the older I've got, it's become like, oh, you're Arab, you've got dark hair and dark eyes, or where are you from? One of the main questions I always get, which pisses me off, because it pisses me off when men ask it me, because I can feel the energy they're asking it me with. If it's a curious, what are you mixed with, then fine. But when I can feel the energy of what a man's asking me it with, like, oh, you look exotic, that's sexy, that's when I don't like it.
Yeah.
But it's literally went from one extreme to another, from being like, ew, Iraqi, you're a terrorist, to, oh, you're Arab, you're Iraqi, that's like sexy, it's unusual.
And in the initial stages, when people have said to you, oh, you look exotic, like, where are you from? And you've then said to them, oh, I'm half Iraqi. Has there ever been any contrast there? So it's gone from being like, oh, exotic, and then they find out that you're Iraqi? No,
not since I've been older.
Okay.
Not since I've been older. When I was younger, but not since I've been older.
You know, at first where it's like, oh, mystery, and then it's like, actually, I don't like that surprise that you've just flung upon me.
No, never. I've never,
Which is insane, isn't it?
Received that. But when I was younger, absolutely. But the older I've got, the older people are more like, and I know this sounds really like weird, but do you know who I think changed that in terms of dark, curvy? Kim Kardashian.
I agree.
I know that it sounds mad.
Is she Algerian?
Albanian. No, not Albanian. Oh, I know this. Where's she from now? But it's not far. She's not Arab at all. But they have that dark hair, dark eyes, curvaceous. That's where I feel like she flipped it.
But before that, because there are some people that you look at and think, I know you're not full white, or I know that you're not full black or full this. Where are you from? And up until then, there'd not really been anybody else that had that publicity that was open to everybody. There might have been like Arab women that were in the public eye, but it might have been an Arab audience that were tuned into them.
Yeah.
Whereas Kim Kardashian came with all of her sisters, and it was like bam, 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 bombshells, like this is who we are. And everybody was then like, okay, like this is what you're working with.
And do you know what I think it is? When you're growing up, actually, this is definitely what it is. When you're growing up, you don't want to be different. And I touched on this on the last podcast about there's an innate need, and it goes back to like years and years from like caveman times, to be part of a tribe. So growing up, if you feel different, whether you realise it or not, you're going to feel like you're going to get pushed out of the tribe because you don't belong there anymore. Whereas I feel like this generation is more into being different. No one wants to be the same. Have you noticed? Everyone's begging to be different.
Definitely.
And so I think where that comes from now is in like that being glorified is you're different. It's appealing to be different.
It is.
But it's such a contrast, because we grew up feeling like, oh, we're the odd one out, to then being an adult and being glorified for looking a certain way, when we've felt all this like resentment because we look different when we're younger.
It is true. But I think, like, are we taught from being young that being different's okay?
No.
And sometimes I think that might be where it stems from. Or is it even noticeable to anybody else that you're different? I know when I was younger, I used to have conversations with my dad, and for 8 years it was just me, my mum and my dad. I didn't have any younger sisters. And from before, when my sisters were born, it was like, okay, my dad almost made me aware that I was slightly different, and not slightly different, because there was other mixed race children there as well, but he made me aware we live in a predominantly white man's country, and before you're ever seen as British, you're going to be viewed as being black.
Really?
And if you walk into a shop and there's you and a little Polish girl, and you say to the shopkeeper, the English girl can have more sweets than the non-English girl, he'd give the Polish girl more sweets because she's white, fair-haired, blue eyes, whereas I was the black girl that must come from somewhere else. Because how many times have, whether it's my dad was born here, go back to your country. Well, my this is my country, this is where I was born. But even still today, you hear, go back to your country, go back where you come from. And it's like, but this was where.
See, that's mad. But I love that your dad sat you down and did that, because we literally had nothing, and it's no fault of my dad's.
Yeah.
Because I feel like my dad was literally, he wasn't born here. My dad came over here when he was for university, so I want to say he was about 18, 19. Yeah. And I think he didn't fully understand. He didn't understand himself to even then sit me down and have this conversation with me, like, you are going to be seen different. You may be seen as a terrorist. Like, people are going to judge you because you're from Iraq and your family's Muslim. And I don't think my mum understood it, because how would she? Or even if she got it, she hadn't experienced being a mixed race person to even comprehend what could come with that, in that whole not belonging or not fitting in or feeling like an outsider. And to go back to what we were speaking about at the beginning with like not belonging in the family dynamics, my mum played her role as like a good little Muslim wife for a long period of time. And then when she left my dad, that's when it was totally different. But for the first like 8 years of our lives in the family home, it was, we eat halal food, you don't drink alcohol, we dress respectably. But then even in those first 8 years, we'd go down to Newcastle, where all my mum's side of the family's from, and it would be drinking, smoking, swearing, partying. So like as a kid, you're like, oh wait, but isn't this wrong?
That's confusing.
Yeah.
And I've got friends who are the same, half Pakistani, and their parents are mixed, so they're like half black and white. And they were, again, very okay, like, we don't drink, we don't eat pork, we pray, we fast, we do this, that and the other. And it was like all that when they went to the dad's, but then when they came to the mum's house, it was like, okay, like, let's all sit around and have a drink together. And that was when the parents had separated. And I think for them, they obviously had that growing up. Like, there was obviously quite a big contrast between what we can do at mum's house and what we can do at dad's house. And it was very much, okay, this has now got to be kept a secret from dad, because we know that we're doing something wrong. But was it wrong, or was it just having the balls to stand up to your dad? Which is, my dad's not Arab or Asian or Muslim, but I wouldn't turn around to my dad knowing I was doing something wrong and saying, well, F you, like, this is what I want to do. It takes balls, it's gutsy.
And that's where I got to. So I think for the first part of it, I like conformed. Maybe my earlier years, like I conformed, and I was like, okay, we'll just keep this away from Baba, like my dad. And then the older I got, I think I started rebelling against it. So it got to a point where anything to do with, when I ran away, anything to do with being Iraqi, anything to do with Muslims, anything to do with that part of me, I hated. Like, when we moved into this flat, and I wasn't speaking to my dad at the time, and the neighbour downstairs is Iraqi, isn't it? And I remember thinking, why are they following me everywhere? Like, it sounds bad, but that's how much I was running away from that half of me.
But why was you running away? Especially from your Iraqi side. What had happened? Had you not been accepted there, or?
I wasn't no, not at all. I was too English for the Arab side. And then in the English side, I didn't fit in there though either, because I wasn't English enough.
Okay.
There was still certain elements of being brought up as a Muslim that I had without even realising, that just didn't fit in with the very English people.
Yeah.
So it just didn't. And so I think for a long time, and it's something I'm still working through now, there's been an inner conflict, like from a very early age, like that inner conflict of, is this respectable? Down to the picture I posted on Instagram yesterday, where it was like talking about, I finally love my body, blah blah blah, but then there's still this bit of guilt, like, is that if my dad saw that,
what is he gonna think of that?
And so there's that, and I don't think that's anything to do with Iraqi. That's more it's more culture and religion, because when you've been brought up being told that that's wrong all your life, to then do it, even though as a grown woman I feel comfortable and I know the intent behind it, it's coming from the right place, I still go back to that little Ruqayyah that's like, this is wrong.
And I think as well, that's where, as much as our experiences may be similar in some ways, you've got a whole other element of, okay, like, yes, culturally, it's like, okay, this is mum and dad's side, but you then throw religion into the mix, it becomes a whole different ball game for you. And that was an element that I didn't really have. People in our family were Christian, and it was like, oh, like, go to church, praise God, like, great if you do, but it wasn't like shunned upon you if you don't, and there was not really, other than like love thy neighbour and this and there was never really Christian practices that were heavily installed in us. No.
And I feel like religion has lost its way in Britain. Like, not lost its way, but it's kind of withered out. Whereas it seems a lot more prominent in other countries, but in Britain it's not a very much, on a whole, like, that's really general, but on a whole, it's not so much a religious country, I don't think.
No, I wouldn't say so either.
So I think with race and then religion on top, it's like this double whammy of conflict. And I just don't think, I say this now, but I just don't think I would ever having a mixed race child, yes, but I don't think I would ever mix religions or mix beliefs in having a child in that situation, would you?
I don't think so. I think it adds just a whole other complication. And I think if I was to get personally with somebody who was of a different religion, one of us is going to have to if I got with a Muslim man, I can't, obviously it can be done, but in my head, rationally, I'd be like, if I'm getting with a Muslim man, there's an element of his practices that I'm looking at thinking, I'm intrigued by this, I like what I see, I like the man that it's made you. Let me follow the path as well. And we're both on the same counterpart, but I have to want to do it for me. Whereas there might be one of my cousin has ended up getting with a Muslim man, and she's very Christian, and I was like, what happens when you have kids? Like, where's the practice that you're going to be doing there? And it was
cross that bridge.
Well, it was kind of, like, oh well, they'll probably be Muslim, but I was like, but is there any resentment there? And why are you so willing to give up your faith? Like, what does that say about your beliefs for it to be okay, like, the kids will take his path? And sometimes I think people think we're so in love, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
And this is what I was saying at the beginning. I really, really think, especially that era where my mum and dad met, because when my dad came over, my dad was one of the first Iraqis. There was like an influx of Iraqis and Arabs that studied here. And so I think, like, English women were like, oh, these dark, mysterious men. And so there's a lot of half Arab half white kids that are around my age now and maybe younger, because it was that first. But before me, my generation, there's not really any.
Not many.
But I think it was like really naive, like, oh, I'm in love, we're both in love, let's like have babies and see what happens, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it's more than crossing a bridge when we come to it, I think, because children are going to take on a whole heap of your own shit, like the parent shit when you have them. Each kid is. When I have kids, I'll probably dump a whole load of stuff on my children, even if I am conscious of it. Same with you.
Yeah.
And we can be as conscious as we want. There's still going to be stuff that our children unpick about us. But then I just think mixing religions is putting a whole next level on top of these children, when it's not a bad intention of the parents. I think it just can be ignorant sometimes.
And I think so. And I think kids already have the pressure. And as much as people look at kids and think, oh, easy life, like, oh, you've got this bit of homework, I think kids have pressure that adults sometimes just will easily look by, because we're dealing with our own pressures and our own stresses, and paying bills, making sure that food's on the table, like dealing with internal conflict within ourselves. But I think when you look closely to kids, there are kids that may struggle, or, you know, like, they don't feel like that they've got that outlet, because it's always seen as like, oh, like, I'm the adult and you're the child, and it's like kids should be seen and not heard. And I think that that's a dangerous message to put out to kids anyway. I think that kids should be heard, but when you've then, so as they're dealing with this conflict of like, oh, the adult's always too busy to speak to me, or I can't voice, as a kid, like, what opinion did you have? It wasn't I've got an opinion, it was, this is shoved on you. But when it's then saying, okay, you've now got to choose, go to mosque or go to church, or like read the Quran, read the Bible,
for a kid.
like that, because it's like, but if I do this, mum's going to be upset, if I do this, dad's going to be upset. What do you do as a child? And who do you speak to about what you do as a child? And are you allowed to make your own decisions, because you've not been able to make them about anything beforehand? So that kid then is internalising everything, growing up and getting to a stage that potentially you were. And saying, what am I meant to do? And it's led to rebellion. And I guess it led to rebellion of you from Islam, because that was what it was, that was drilled and enforced in you, and you thought, that's what's restricting me, so that's what's got to go in the bin.
And I honestly got to a point where I just hated everything about that side of me. And that's like, that's mad self-hate. That level of self-hate is deep. Like, to resent and hate a whole half of who you are, that's deep rooted stuff that it's took me a long time to work through. Like, when I was growing up, and I said this in the post yesterday, like, I wanted blonde hair and blue eyes and white skin. And because my older sister's white, she's got a different dad to us lot, she had blonde hair, blue eyes. So the two women that I looked up to in my family were white. So I was growing up wanting to be like my mum and my older sister. I idolised them. And there wasn't really any representation of a brown girl or a whatever colour, like this caramelly, lighty,
and I think
there was no representation of that. Like, the princesses weren't curly hair, or so there was no woman that I looked up to that looked like me. So it just formed into this like deep rooted self-hate until it probably started being idolised a little bit. And I fell into like this trap of, oh yeah, I'm the nice mix now, And I did, like, I gassed myself up over it for quite a bit.
A long time.
But it was because I'd hated myself for so long, so external validation was what I needed in that time to gain some confidence in how I looked. but then I could clock it was external validation. But that wasn't until I started on this journey I'm on now.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes longer than others to get to that stage of understanding. I think for me it was, I guess growing up and talking about that external validation, it was like, oh, like I'm light skinned. Although I'm a darker mixed race, it was being light skinned with curly hair, and it was the curly hair that was.
It was the curly hair.
It was the curly hair that was like, now I like girls with curly hair, and I thought, I've got
That's
that.
me.
Like that's me. Like, let me step up and take my place almost. And I think, again, only as you start getting older, like I've always had friends from many different backgrounds. And I think as I was getting older, that was then when I started realising that this curly, one of my friends is a dark skinned black girl, and her hair is curly, beautiful curls. And every day it was, have you got a wig on? Whereas I would never get asked that. And I thought, well, why is it that they'd ask her and not me? And it was because curly hair is for mixed race people. And that's where the two categories stay. And it was like they couldn't understand that she was black. It was, well, why is your hair so nice? Why is it not tight? Why is it not short? Why is it not, why, you know, like they just couldn't grasp that concept of it. But then I think that comes with colorism as well. And I think I've been in situations before where, because I am maybe slightly a darker shade of mixed race, especially when I've been on holiday, if people don't know who I am, I get approached as a black girl.
Really?
Not a mixed race girl. And that's friends.
And how do you get approached as a black girl, and what's the difference?
I wouldn't say approached as a black girl in terms of, there's a lot more respect there. In terms of, in terms of like mixed race girl, you're seen as stush, easy, this fetish, and you get treated like a fetish. Whereas a black girl, it sometimes is like, oh, like queen, like can't approach her if I'm not on my shit. And that's what, and then this is where my turmoil comes in, because I think I'm going to knock somebody's head off in a minute. Because me as a person, it shouldn't change how I'm looked at or how I'm viewed because of what you think I am. But I've had friends before that have made, you know, I'm talking friends for a while, not like close friends, but friends that will go out for food or will go out this, that, and the other, male friends, and they'll talk about, oh, every mixed race girl's got daddy issues and like don't know the dad and this, that, and the other, because the black man will just get off and get with another. And I was like, hang on there. I was like, I fall into this category that you're talking about, and my dad's very much present. For some people they are, for some people no, but I was like, my dad's very much present. So for you to generalise what you're talking about, I'm triggered now. And he said, but you're black. And I said, but I'm not. Mum, yes, I am. And this is where it comes in that people will see, oh, your skin's black. But I said, my mum is very much a white woman. Right, I didn't know that, this, and the other. You know, you don't act like a mixed race person unless, but what's that? What is acting like a mixed race person? And there's been guys that I've started speaking to or dating before as well, and they'll find out that I'm mixed race, and the number one question is, would you say that you're more black or more white?
This is I put it up on Insta, and I was like, talk to me about being mixed race, blah, blah, blah. And do you know how many replies I got about, they will always get asked, would you say you're more black or more white? How do you feel about that question?
It pisses me off.
Why?
Because
why should you have to choose? Sorry, I know I'm answering
no, it's fine. Why should I have to choose? In my head, if somebody was to say, this is how black people act and this is how white people act, in terms of the music that I like, the food that I like, the friends that I hang around with, who I have potentially maybe more in common with, I have my answer in my head. And those close enough to me may also potentially know, oh, like, this is, maybe she's more black than white or more white than black. I think I get triggered when somebody I don't know asks me, because I think you're trying to pass judgment on me now to deem whether or not I'm worth your time or worthy. Instead of just getting to know me as a person, if I'm dating, say, and it's never, you don't really get, I'm not as triggered when mixed race people ask, just because I feel like...
Because they represent you.
They're representing me. So I feel like there's an element of conversation there.
Why are you not as triggered when a mixed race person? Because that's an interesting point. Because if a white person, black person, Arab, Pakistani, why would that trigger you as opposed to a mixed race person that wouldn't trigger you?
Because I feel like you've had the same questions and there's a level of understanding there.
But then the fact that they've had the same questions, wouldn't you think that they wouldn't ask those questions?
To a certain extent, yes. There's never really been any mixed race person that has asked me that. But I feel like if they did, I wouldn't be as triggered.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it'd open up a whole conversation that I didn't feel as, not even vulnerable. I just wouldn't have my back up as much because I think that there's a level of like, okay, like this, what's your experience? What's my experience? Why would you say that? Like, and trying to pick at each other's brains almost.
Do you know why I think it's more triggering? Because as a mixed race person, that not for every person, not every mixed race person, but on a general scale, that's a battle that you've probably been trying to figure out your whole life anyway. So then for somebody to come out right that you don't know and ask you what they think is just a standard question, it's triggering because it's a deep-rooted unsureness that you've probably been going back and forth with for a long time. And then if you feel more black, then you feel guilt for being less white, and if you feel more white, you feel guilt for being less black. And that's probably why it's so triggering, because that's an internal battle that maybe you don't deal with as much anymore, but it's triggering because it was an issue at one point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100% what you're saying is right. And I feel like being asked that by black, or I think it's more triggering when they're of the same race as me. So not mixed race, but if it's like a black or a white, there's potential for me to be triggered there by somebody Asian or Arab. But I think if somebody white was to ask me, you're trying to pass judgment. If I said, oh, I feel like I'm more white, you're going to look at me and be like, how can you be white? Like, you're not white, so how can you be white? And if I said, oh, I'm more black, it's like, oh, if a black person's looking, okay, so you're black but you're lighter skinned, and then comes you don't really understand what it is to be a black person because you've got the lighter skin privilege, which, and yeah, there will be elements to that I do have a lighter skin privilege. Or it's then like a quiz, like, okay, if you're black, like, let's find out how black you really are. Like, can you cook? What time? You know, like these little questions that then, if I said to them, I don't cook, I don't do this, I don't watch black movies, I don't listen to black music, they would then say, well, you're not more black then.
So it's that thing that I was saying before. It's constantly feeling like you need to prove yourself. And how can you prove yourself when you're not sure? Because how can you be one or the other when you are half of each?
It's true. But I think it's to do with who you've not felt most rejection from, but where that conflict comes in. Because I would say, if somebody asked me that question, as much as I hate it, I would say I probably resonate more with the black side of me than I would the white.
Why?
I think the conversation that I had with my dad from being younger about my skin colour, I think I've never really experienced racism from black people, because I think that they would, in past experience, they've kind of welcomed you with open arms. And it's like, you're one of us, yeah, you're lighter skinned, but you're black, like you're part of this journey. Whereas I've had racial comments from white people. I've had disputes with family members about what I should identify as, my race, my this, that and the other. I've had, my younger sisters and I have had abuse, like threats from white people. So I think there's always that resentment there sometimes.
Yeah, well,
towards,
it's gonna be.
Yeah. Whereas I've never had a black person that's turned around and said, oh, you're this, or you're that, or called me, I don't even know what an abusive racial term for a mixed race person would be. There's been mixing pot before, or like soup or whatever it.
Really?
Yeah, just like, oh, you like a little bit of everything, like mixed in a bowl.
See, do you know what's mad? Well, it's not mad because I look totally different to a black and white mixed race person. In terms of society, how I look has never been a thing, but apart from terrorists.
Yeah.
But in terms of like society, yeah, there's been the odd racial comment, like it was more packy and you're a terrorist. That was when I was younger, and I don't remember it being a point where it caused anything. It was kind of like, but then I don't know if that's because of how I was as a child and how I just am. It's defense. I just go into defense mode. But society hasn't actually been a thing, because I can go to Spain and people will think I'm Spanish. I go to Italy, people speak to me in Italian. It seems like anywhere I go, I can kind of pass off as. So Iraq, people have thought I was full white before. Like, so in a society, like, if we're talking the outside world, my struggle has never been with the outside world in terms of how I look, what colour I am, what race I am, the colour of my skin. It's never really been that. Mine came more from like that internal struggle of being at my dad's house or being around, going to Iraqi parties and hearing them talk about white people and them looking down on white people, and then going to the white side and hearing them talk down on the Iraqis. So it was kind of like, but wait, I'm half of both of these.
So where's my safe place?
Yeah.
And there wasn't one.
Because with the Iraqis, it's like, oh, well, you know, white people are this, white people are that. With the white people, it was like, oh, well, you know, those Muslims,
Yeah.
So then it was, I'd be there and think, oh, well, where does that leave me? Because I'm half of each. So that's where it came. And it was never, in the family, it was never like to me. I don't think it was, no. Or with the Arabs, or with the white people, it was never to me. I just hear conversations.
Passive.
And I knew how they felt about
one another.
Yeah.
And I think I've never really had it in that family dynamic sense.
Have you not?
It's more been that outer, how everybody else has viewed it. And I think, no, I've not really had it. The only thing, I sometimes will try and people please.
In what sense?
So in terms of like, instead of just being wholeheartedly myself, sometimes I'm like, I'm too black for the white side of my family. So in order to let everybody be comfortable, when they get in the car, let's just whack Capital on, because we can all have a sing along to that. I know that my cousins like that music, as opposed to me maybe wanting to listen to Unity Radio, or that's when I'm like, right, okay. And I've always done that for my white side, not my black side.
Okay.
But I think that's because I've never felt like I've had to
be anyone else your black side.
Because they understand the texture of my hair, why the texture of my hair is like this. Like, if I go to my cousin's house on my black side, or my auntie's house, or family wise, even down to little things, I know that they'll have a slicking brush for me to do my hair, and I know that they'll have foundation if I potentially, maybe it might be a bit too dark, but I might be able to put a bit of bronzer on my cheeks, or there's certain elements, whereas these are the little things that consciously I have to think about before I go and stay at maybe my white family's house, is make sure you pack your brushes. You can't forget to pack your brush, because, and even if you forget to pack your brush, don't think that you're going to find a smoothing brush in the areas that they live. For you to buy one, you've got to take that with you. Don't forget your makeup, because nobody's going to have any shades or found anything. Mascara, even your lipstick shades, probably I won't be able to. You know, just like the little things like that. So it's been that element, yes, but never anything in terms of like family I've heard making certain comments about one another. I've never had to fight with that internal whereas it's been more the outside
as opposed to the inside. And I think with it being the inside, because society on a whole, I feel is improving in comparison to when like my dad was first came here and when your dad was growing up. I think society on a whole is improving. Like there's books now, and there's Disney films, and there wasn't any of that when we were growing up. But I think, and I'd like to hope that internally in the home that's improving. But I think I feel that's got a lot further to go, because people are so naively having babies. One of the things that I wanted to speak about this for was just to have like, to not go into it so naively.
So an awareness.
An awareness, yeah. So so if I have a child now and it's to say if it's to a black man, I will be so aware of how can I celebrate my child's black side. What can I do to incorporate that side, even if I'm not with the dad? How can I incorporate that into their everyday life where that's celebrated, where it's not oh, that's because of your dad that you're too black, or that's because of your this, that your hair's the way it like, which I know I've spoke to a lot of mixed race people who have said the mum would make flippant comments or the dad would make flippant comments about the other side.
And I think that's important. And even going from like what you've just spoke about then, and going from before when you're talking about, oh, like kids being a fetish, sometimes it's, you want this mixed race kid with the tan skin, so they're not going to have to go on the tanning beds, and they've got beautiful curly hair. But do you know that not every mixed race child comes out with curly hair? Like your hair texture, for example, I think when you think mixed race, that's the hair that you get. My hair is a lot tighter than that. My youngest sister came out and she had thick, coarse afro hair. And it's like, you're not always going to get, you can't dial in, this is how I want my kids.
Pretty little mixed race, curly hair.
Are you still going to love your kid the same if they come out with that afro hair as opposed to... And it is a case of, okay, I've got a friend who is single parent but does everything she possibly can for her mixed race child to incorporate her child's black side. And there was times where she might not have known, what do I put in her hair texture is very different to mine. Girls, what do I put in my child's hair? How do I do the hair in order?
That. And yes, like the practical, but just emotionally, like, are you celebrating everything that this child is? Are you celebrating all the different cultures that are mixed into this child? Are you celebrating like the foods, as opposed to like, because when I was growing up, neither was celebrated on the separate sides. Once my mum and dad had split up, it was kind of like, oh God, it was that kind of energy. So who I wasn't celebrated, and I say this with love, like it's not like, oh, I wasn't, because I understand that my parents were just doing the best that they could, and I feel like our generation is a lot more able to talk about this kind of stuff because we're not in survival mode. And I've touched on this a couple of times with you, haven't I? I feel like our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, were in survival mode. How do I feed them? How do I clothe them? How do I keep them warm? Whereas our generation has the luxury of, how do I feel? Where is this coming from? Like, it's a luxury that they didn't have back then. So it's not like in a judgy way of my parents or that generation, but I just think with the luxury that we have now, which isn't a luxury, it should have always just been doing, but they didn't have that. With the luxury that we have, I feel like we're not in survival mode anymore. A lot of us, we have the capacity, the time, the money to be able to heal and to work from the root up, like where does all this come from? And with that, I'd like to think that people and parents have the time to listen to these kind of conversations, to be involved in these kind of conversations, so that when they are having mixed race children, which it looks like society's just gonna keep
morphing,
that they're aware of celebrating them, like, what are my child's emotional needs as a mixed race child? Not just as a child, but as a mixed race child. What are their emotional needs? What are their physical needs when you talk about hair? But what are their emotional needs? What do they actually need from me? How can I prevent this self-hate that runs through a lot of mixed race people, or this self-confusion? Where do I belong? How can I help my child to feel like she or he belongs as much as he possibly can in a world where he or she is a mix of different races?
It's true.
That was a whole tangent, wasn't it?
It was, but what you've said is true, and it's about, maybe we could start by mixed race people having conversations with the parents, because sometimes like I feel like I have frequent conversations with my mum and dad anyway, surrounding this as it is just how, and they're quite good because they'll listen. But if every mixed race person sat down with the mum and said, "Mum, did you know that I felt like this growing up? Or did you know that I wasn't accepted here, or I overheard this conversation?" Sometimes that then might be a trigger as to be, oh, like, I didn't know that.
And just speaking and voicing something helps it heal, it helps it clear. Like, energetically it releases just through talking about it. And I had a conversation with my dad, could be this year, and me and my dad are only just mending our relationship. Like, it's come on leaps and bounds. But in that conversation, like he said, I take ownership of it, and we haven't dig deep as that I think we can. But he held his hands up. He said, it was confusing for you, Karar and Zay, like my brothers, because yous were brought up with such a drastic contrast of English and Iraqi, but also say Christian loosely and Muslim, and there was so much confusion whilst we were being brought up. And so he took ownership, and he was like, I wholeheartedly take ownership for that.
And that's big of your dad.
Fully. Massive. Absolutely. And I appreciated that so much. I don't think I've had that conversation. Have I had that conversation with my mum? There's so much other. Have I? I feel like we've tipped the iceberg on it, if that's a saying. But I don't feel like we've went deep. And it's only because this is something, in terms of like the journey that I'm on, this is something that's becoming more prominent now that I'm aware of. And it's only since me and my dad have been back in each other's lives that I can look back and think, wow, so you really like, you dismissed that side of you for a long time. If anyone had have said, say if I was 25, 26, if anyone had have said to me, you resent being Arabic and you resent who you are, you don't like that side of you, I'd have been triggered and said, no, I fucking don't. Who are you talking to? No, I don't. I'm a back. Like, I would have. But in hindsight, looking back now, I can look at it and be like, wow, like you really dismissed a whole half of you. But because I'm in a place where I can see that now, like when I go to my dad's, I'm like, oh, Baba, so what does this surah mean in the Quran? And it's not that I class myself as a Muslim, but I just want to learn, like, and I'm asking, like, so in Iraq, what happened for us to then live there? And I'm finding out about, and I'm curious again about my heritage, my culture, like all of this part of me that I dismissed for so long.
And I guess sometimes as well, you've dismissed it because there was people from that, I guess, culture that had dismissed you.
Yeah.
And that's why there was time, did you not go on holiday and somebody had made a comment and you turned around in Arabic and they were like,
oh mate, the amount of times that happened.
I love that story, but
literally, whenever I go on, so it's when I go to like Arab countries, because I'm in a bikini, I'm drinking, the Iraqi women or Arab women won't know I'm Iraqi.
Yeah.
So they'll talk about us, like whoever I'm with. And the amount of times I've turned around and said, I know exactly what you're saying in Arabic. And they're gobsmacked. And I've had that, the Arab side of me, the Arab side looked down on me. Like, I looked the part, but I was too English. But I think, I was going to say something then, it's completely gone out of my head. But I do think that is like, what was we talking about before I was saying that?
Just saying how you'd dismissed that side of you.
And I've dismissed it because mine and my dad's relationship was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
So when I thought about my Iraqi side, it was just triggering pain. And that's what I can see now in looking back. It wasn't that I hated Iraqis or that I hated like being Arabic. It was that the remembrance of me being Iraqi and being Arabic was a trigger point to, but I'm in so much pain because mine and my dad's relationship is to shit. And it wasn't, there's elements of, yes, I was like quite condemned in that group, but also because it was such a trigger point that I ignored for a long time. It's like, I don't need my dad, I'm cool, I'm fine, I don't need him in my life. And so that, remembering that side of me would trigger how much pain I was in, that mine and my dad's relationship was so non-existent. But yeah.
Marta, there's definitely healing to be done within
fully
being mixed race. And I think sometimes people might not even realise. I think there was elements to my journey that I'd not realised. I have just always been okay. I'm mixed race, but like to society I'm deemed as a black girl. That's what I've been brought up and that's how I'm fine. But I think until we very first had this conversation and you'd asked triggering questions and it made me sit and think, and I was like,
what did it highlight for you?
More than anything, I think it highlighted, but why do you see yourself black when you're mixed race?
Okay.
Because that's essentially, I won't deny that I'm mixed race. If somebody says, what are you? It'll be mixed race. But more than anything, like, I view myself as, oh, you're this black girl. And you was like, but why? Because you're not. And why is it? I guess it made me question and dig a lot deeper into why is it so more prominent that I follow that side as opposed to the white. And I think it's the little things like I'd said before about the white side of me. Not all of them, but there's certain people I fell out with, family members, because as much as I'll say to them I'm black, it's like the conversation that they've then flipped around on its head is, well, you mixed race, don't forget that. And I've said, but you can't tell me how to identify, because as a middle-aged white man, you can't tell me how my experience in Old Trafford shouldn't have been XYZ, because it's very multicultural, because Old Trafford has been some of the places where I have experienced racism, and you're saying, but it's not racist, it's multicultural, and I'm saying, you've not seen that side of it because you're a middle-aged white man, and that's why you've not. So I think there's been conflict there, and that's sometimes why I think I am proud to stand up and say, this is who I am, this is the colour of me. And I've been more widely accepted by black people than I have white. Yeah. So.
And I think that conversation that your dad had with you from a very young age set the tone for that.
Absolutely.
And he kind of let you know that this is what it is.
And it was the reality check. Yeah. It wasn't to say, this is what I want you to be. This is my dad saying, as safe as you are in this house, there's a big bad world out there that don't get upset if you're not picked for being the English girl. Because the reality is you've got black skin, and that's what people are going to notice.
So to round up and wrap up, what do you think there's one thing that people can do going forward to help, I would say, in terms of like how mixed race people feel, or in having mixed race children?
I think having conversations and an understanding, whether that's conversations with friends or peers, being mindful not to insult, but being intrigued by it and having a genuine interest, and moving forward, if there are two races that are to combine and get together, again, having as much involvement yourself in let's celebrate what are the different traditions, what are the different foods, and as much as I am learning you need to learn me, and having that balance.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think similar, I'd say exactly the same. And one of the key things I'd say is to celebrate it, like celebrate your child's differences to you, and allow whatever race you're in the home, allow it to be normal to see other children of a similar mix to them, and to celebrate it, like to not speak down on the mix that they are, but to celebrate it, and just to normalize having these conversations in general, like, because I know for me, you were the first person that I spoke to about feeling like I never actually felt like I belonged on either side of the families. Like, not that they didn't love me, but in terms of who I was very aware that I was different to everybody around me. Like, not even like, I was going to say normal, but that was stupid. Not even your typical mixed race, which is generally black and white people. Yeah. I was just very aware that you're mixed race, black and white, I'm mixed race, it's different. Am I even mixed race? Like, it created this whole weirdness. So I would say, speak to your children from a very early age. Normalize having these conversations as children, adults, elders, whatever, and to celebrate everything that your child is, and to incorporate both races.
Absolutely.
Both cultures, both religions.
I think so as well.
I think so. Right, our kids, you have been watching the Feel It, Heal It podcast. Let me know what you think in terms of like being mixed race, and let me know what you think of the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.